Hey, welcome back to my basement. It's Jeremiah Wolf, and oh, hey, let me just let me just take a sip of coffee here. Excuse me. Oh, oh yeah, my celebrity cruise mug. I won this mug on a cruise last fall, a comic book trivia quiz game. At 40 some years old, my wife and I were pretty much the youngest people on the cruise, so it was not hard for me to dominate and win this mug. No, I was kind of making fun of Network Chuck there with his always sipping the coffee. Oh, God, that drives me nuts. If you watch Network Chuck, he seems like a good guy. He just went full time on YouTube. Man, good luck to him. I think he's got like 4 kids. Holy crap! Uh, so I gotta be scary, man. So good luck to him. I genuinely, I really hope it works out. But the drinking coffee thing, God, that drives me nuts. leave what I do that drives you nuts in the comments down below. All right, so today I want to talk about well, your career, and I want to give you some tips on how you can advance your career. Obviously, we're just going to cover things at a high level, but I think this should be good. So let's come over here. And so I got 10 tips for you about advancing your career. We're going to cover topics within the technical, social, and political realms of your career. When I say political, I mean office politics. I don't mean government. Although if your job is in government, you still have office politics. Um, so let's get into it. But first, there's a couple things I want to talk about. And the first thing is as you go through your career, um, you know, I made pizza dough today. I made pizza dough and pretzel dough today, and they're both fermenting in the fridge. We have some new neighbors, so I wanted to make them some pretzels, which is just this thing that I do. And so I made the dough, but then they were gone this evening, so I didn't want to bake it. So it's fermenting in the fridge. Should just make it even better. And then, I made pizza dough today with the intent of having that ferment for a couple days. And so I smell of yeast and flour, and I gotta tell you, I love that smell. I love it. Anyway, okay, back to your career. One of the things that is important to understand as you're thinking about your career is you need to prepare for the plateau. And what do I mean by this? Well, as you get started in your career, this is down here. So this is going to be time, and this is going to be salary. So as time increases, hopefully your salary is also increasing, but eventually it's going to plateau. And this is something that kind of takes people by surprise for some reason, especially what happens a lot in the technical field. If you're a bright person, if you're working hard, what often happens is that you'll see your career start to really take off early on. You'll get a job as a help desk tech, and then before you know it, you're tier 2, and then get a couple certs, and before you know it, you're tier 3, and it just keeps going up and up. But eventually, you're going to max that out, and then you're going to kind of stagnate. And even though you're still getting certifications, you're still working hard, you're going to hit a plateau, and that's going to happen in every career. And this can be really troublesome if you're the kind of person who's a little bit of a prodigy, early on. We see this a lot in the technical fields. You're not actually a prodigy. Maybe you are. Good for you. But, you work hard and you strive and you achieve. And so, if you're getting started at, say, I don't know, 22 years old, over here, you might hit the plateau at 30 or 35. That's still pretty early in your career. You got another 30 years of work left and you've kind of plateaued. So this is one of those things that you need to be prepared for just mentally. And there's no need to really harp on this too much, but as you're making financial decisions, as you're planning for your future, it's important to recognize this is going to happen. And I would recommend that either you accept that and say, okay, well, I know that that's going to happen at some point, or you decide how you can, expand that plateau. And we'll talk about a couple ways to do that here in a minute. The next thing I want to talk about is salary potential. So we're talking about your career here. And so this first set of graphs, this can be either, let's do here. This can be either engineering or sales. And what do these graphs represent? Well, the white graph here represents the lowest tier, right? And it's the widest, although the white and blue look pretty similar. It's the widest. There's always going to be more people in tier 1. There's always going to be more people doing telemarketing, doing cold calling, those kind of sales jobs, retail. So there's always going to be a lot more people in this, in this area. And these are going to be the lowest paid people. Then you move up to tier 2. So this is either tier 1 or this tier 1 sales, tier 1 technical. Same thing here, tier 2. Here you have slightly fewer people than in tier 1, but you have the potential to make a lot more money, or significantly more. Usually not, maybe as much as double, And then here we have the sort of tier 3 or tier 4. This is more of a tier 4. So we're going to call this tier 3 and tier 4-ish. And this is going to be tier 4 to senior. And level. And there, again, you have your opportunity to make pretty much almost double what tier 2 does. If, obviously there's a lot fewer of those people, and if you can really distinguish yourself, then you have the opportunity to make good money. But again, you're still going to hit that plateau. Now, there's something interesting in this category over here, because you still have the opportunity to go even higher if you're doing sales. So here's something to be aware of. Sales the highest levels of sales is almost always going to make more money than the highest level of pure technical people. This includes sales engineering. So this is something to be aware of. Obviously, this is different from company to company. There are some companies that really reward engineers. Usually they're companies that were started by engineers, but those are few and far between. We hear about the Googles and the Facebooks and stuff like that, where engineers seem to have like this, mythic status within the company. That's what we hear. Who knows what the reality is? Certainly not what we think it is. But in the vast, vast majority of the corporate world, sales always makes more money. Why is that? Well, sales is what brings in money. And it doesn't matter that sales couldn't sell anything if you were not there to support it, configure it, deploy it, or fix it. That doesn't matter. Because there's this mentality, usually among management, that we can always get more technical people, but a great salesperson can't be replaced. And this is one of those things that as an engineer, it's kind of soul crushing. So let me give you an example. I was working at this place, and I was a senior engineer at this company, and I was paid pretty well, but the sales guys, who was in the entire company, was just a small group of people, 10 or 15 people. They all made like minimum 150 grand, minimum up to 300 plus grand a year. Now, they were commission based, so it varied from year to year. But here's these dudes, and it's so frustrating because, like the one guy, he's always flying all over the world with his family, constantly seems to be constantly on vacation. He's never in the office, and he's closing these big deals, and he's making hundreds of thousands of dollars. And you know what? He's always, whenever he is in the office, he's at my cube asking me questions, trying to understand things, asking for favors that I could do to either help his sale go smoothly or do something for his customer kind of on the side, so that not, nothing unethical necessarily, just can I prioritize this customer over that customer because they're thinking about closing on this deal, so could you just maybe bump this up in the queue a little bit. And so it's frustrating because here's this guy who is making so much more money, making over more than double what I was making, and yet he's constantly relying on me to do his job. And on top of all that, he was a jerk. So it's one of those things. As an engineer, as a technical person, you got to be prepared for it. That's the reality. Now, as an engineer, as a technical person, you have the opportunity for yourself to get into sales. A friend of mine, I've mentioned this person before, years ago. She got in with Cisco, and she got me an interview. I went through the interview process, and it was this crazy thing where the guy that I would be replacing was retiring, and he didn't want to wait for me to go through the training. So they wanted someone with a little more experience than I had. Anyway, it was really frustrating because I totally could have done the job. But this is actually, I'd love to make a video about this. I could have got that job. I dropped the ball. And it's only in retrospect that I realized that the hiring manager gave me every opportunity. He even said it, convinced me. Like, he wanted to hire me. He's like, please, I want you to convince me why I can. And I was too naive, and I didn't have the balls to do it. So that was a hard lesson to learn, But she got into Cisco. And I have no idea what she made. She's still there. That was been 10, 12 years ago now, 13 years ago, something like that. She's been with Cisco. At the time when I was talking to the team, and we talked about money and stuff, and those guys, they had a base salary of about 120. Again, this was like 12, 13 years ago. But then they got bonuses on top of that. And so they regularly made into the 200s a year. Not every year, every year is different but it's because it was commission based and whatever. But it was one of those things where they did very, very well. And these were technical people. Most of them were very technical people who also had very good people skills. So they just fit that really narrow niche of high-end engineer and high-end sales. Great, just really fascinating position. And man, I wish I'd got in there. And that was my fault, though. 100% my fault. So that's something to be aware of as you're kind of planning the future of your career. I just want you to be aware of what's possible so you know what to work toward. The other thing here is, this is management. So same thing with management. Here's your team leader. Here's your middle. This is your department head. And here we have sort of upper management. These are your directors. Below, not quite VP level, but below that. And this is one of those things too where, you can, as a technical person, you can make, even from a tier 2, you can make that jump over to here. You got to be careful not to get yourself in a dead-end position, but tier 2 and definitely tier 3 can make the jump over to middle management and even into upper management. So this is one of those things too to keep in mind as you're planning your career. Maybe right now you really like the technical stuff, but if you seem to have a knack for it, if you're good working with people, if you make a good leader, if you don't mind endless meetings and making spreadsheets and writing documentation, reports and stuff like that, that could be a way to go. And I kind of have always been somewhere in between, where I've always been either a manager of a team, but I've always also been a working engineer. So I kind of like that. I like having a team. It can be very stressful, but it's something I enjoy. And, the thing with middle management is roughly about the same kind of income that a high-level engineer is going to make. A high-level middle management and a high-level engineer are going to make roughly the same management. Upper management can make significantly more. Again, that varies from company to company, but it's one of those things. Once you hit that plateau, that might be the only next step. So you hit that technical plateau. So then maybe it's time to think about sales or management. Okay. So that's just kind of, I want you to think about, where you want your career to go as we talk about these 10 tips. So let's get into it. All right. So I'm going to be, I'm not going to get too crazy with this. I know my videos always run long. First thing, let's talk about education. So I got 3 technical tips, 3 social tips, 3 political tips, and then my top tip. Okay, so let's talk about education. So the first thing, as you start off in your career, you want to specialize. It's so important that you specialize. If you are a jack of all trades, you will find that you get stuck in your career very quickly. If you're the server guy and the network guy and the web guy and the desktop support guy or gal, be prepared to be stuck there. And one of the things that happens is that you see those people, they tend to get trapped in sort of smaller companies making not very good money. And when they try to get out of there, they don't have, usually they've worked so many hours because they got all this stuff on their plate that they just kind of get stuck there. They have a hard time getting out of there. So the best way to kind of break out of that and get your career moving, the easiest way, the quickest way, is specialization through certification. So here's where your certs come in. Now, one of my good friends kind of found himself in this situation where he had just kind of got stuck in this, just being that jack of all trades, and it required some pretty big changes in his life. He had to move and then was kind of forced to find another job, and then luckily they recognized its talents because it was a bigger company, so there was a path for growth, and so he broke out of it. But I also know a lot of people that don't ever break out of it. So now he did it without certifications, but I feel like he probably could have done it faster if he had. This is my opinion. If you're watching, dude, I'm not judging you. So specialization, but that's really the way to get you going, specialization. The next thing is diversification. What you just said, specialize. Well, here's the thing. Once you specialize, then you begin to broaden. Now, why do you do that? Because if I have engineer A who is really good at routing and switching, Cisco, maybe even knows Cisco and Juniper. But engineer B is just as good at routing and switching, but engineer B also knows a little server stuff. Engineer B also knows a little scripting, dev stuff. It's going to allow you to take on more projects. It's going to allow you to have a more prominent role in projects. It's going to allow you to interface with people from other departments or your customers in a more in-depth way. Your customers are going to get to know you better. Your contemporaries in other departments are going to get to know you better. They're going to start asking for you. Now, let me give you an example of how I give lots of examples from my own life, and I want to be real clear. I don't want to sound arrogant. I have a lot of experience. I've done a lot of things. So I'm just sharing an example. I hope I don't sound like some kind of arrogant asshole. But one example of this was, this actually did happen more than once, but I was in a sales meeting. I'm at my office in the conference room waiting for the customers to come in. And the sales guy, in fact, the guy that I was just bashing a minute ago, the guy who made a ton of money but was also a jerk, he brings in the customer, and they hadn't signed yet. And the customer, the head guy at the customer's office, sees me. He's like, "Oh, Jeremiah." I'm like, "Oh, hey, man." He just turns to the sales guy. He's like, "Okay, we're good. If Jeremiah's going to be Jeremiah's on board, we're good. We'll sign." That was it. That was it. I made that guy like, I don't know, 50, 60 grand that day. Did I get any of it? No. I got my regular salary. But why? Well, it's because I had worked with them on something else, and because I had been able to interact with them and I had provided a good level of service, and because I knew enough where people want you on more calls, they want you to be present, you just become more visible. And when the management and the project managers and the other engineers and the customers, especially the customers, get to know you because of that, it boosts your career, creates opportunities for you. So first you specialize to boost your career, to get to that higher level, and then along the way you're also learning other things to make yourself even more valuable. Now, you're not going to be an expert in everything, don't confuse what I'm saying, but by knowing more, you're able to interact more and you're able to understand more and contribute more. Okay, next. All right, this is a big one for engineers. This is something that's going to make or break your career. Please pay attention to this one. Provide solutions, don't solve problems. What do I mean by that? Engineers love to solve problems. We love to look at a system, a proposal, RFP, whatever it is, and we love to say, "Oh, this isn't going to work. That's not going to work. See this. Yeah, that's not right. That's not right." You know what that does? That just pisses everybody off. You might be 100% right, but it's not going to help you. What you want to be is the person who provides solutions. So because you're never going to have a shortage of people who are pointing out the problems, but when you're the one voice in the room who says, "You know what? I can make that work. Yeah, I'll take care of it. I can do that." That stands out. Once management, sales, project managers start to know that you're the person who can solve problems, you're the guy who's they're going to be asking for. You're the guy who's going to be put on the more complex projects. You're the guy who's going to be put on the higher profile projects. And when it comes to your career, man, being visible is so important. So who's going to be the engineer that they want to include in the meeting when the VP is in town or when the owner of the company is in town? They want to put negative Nancy, who's always like, "Well, that's not the right way to do it. You need this redundancy, and if this isn't there, then it's never going to work right." Or the person who's going to be like, "Okay, I think I see a few issues with this, but I know we can make it work. I'm going to sit down with so and so and take a look at this and see. There might be one or two little changes we got to make, but I know we can make this happen and we can get it done for you." That's the person that people want to work with. Provide solutions. Just real quick, there's this guy I used to work with, and talking about that plateau. He had plateaued. He was a manager, a low-level team leader type manager, and he was never considered for promotion. And here's this guy. When I knew him, he was in his late 40s, maybe even his 50s. And here I come in my 20s, making twice as much money as this guy. I start, well, not at first maybe. I started in a junior position, and within a matter of a year or two, he's calling me sir. I'm calling the shots. Why? Because I was providing solutions. What did he do? He would sit in these meetings and just complain about how there wasn't enough money, there wasn't enough resources, there wasn't enough people. And, and that's all that the management team, that's all that sales, that's all that project management, that's all they heard. No one hears that and says, "Oh, I need to go back and fix this." They just hear, he's just trying to put a stop to the project. Once you get on board, once you've know that once they know that you can make it happen, then they're going to listen to you. And if you say, hey, listen, we're going to need this other license to make this work, or we're going to need to spend a few more grand in hardware to make this work, people are going to listen to you then, but only once you've proven that you're the person that can make, that you can provide solutions. Don't be that negative Nancy. Okay, so the last part of the technical thing is critical also. It's all critical, but manage expectations. Manage others' expectations of you. There is this great scene from Star Trek, The Next Generation, where they find Scotty, and he's, from the original Star Trek, he's trapped in like a transporter or something. They get him out, and, so now he's 70 years in the future, whatever it was. And he's talking to Geordi, the visor guy, and he tells him that, he had this reputation of being a miracle worker, and it was because every time Captain Kirk would ask him how long it would take, he would just multiply it by 4. So he would always come in under the way under budget. And here's the thing. At first, when I heard that as a kid, I thought, oh, that's clever. But when I became an engineer, I realized that is not only clever, it's necessary, because almost all engineers vastly overestimate their capability. It is my experience that when given a project, and I look through it and say, okay, I need to do this, 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 and this, it's going to take me, I'm probably going to need about 40 hours to do that. The truth is, it's almost always double. Whatever my estimate is, it's almost always double. So I started telling my guys, because we started running into problems where we would make an estimate, project management would understandably hold us to that estimate, but we would never meet it. It would always be over, and then we're getting swamped, we're behind, we're working tons of overtime. And so, one of the lessons I learned was always at least double what it's going to take you. And then I started basically tripling it. And when you run into problems, I was still able to do it on time. And when things went well, I got it done well under time. So I got a reputation as the guy, again, who could get it done and get it done quick. Even though it was just taking me as long as it always had, I was just changing people's expectations. One other thing, another story. I used to work with this woman, and she was very talented, great voice engineer. And she kind of bought into the mentality of, if I sacrifice for the company will sacrifice for me when I need it. If I work 60 hours week after week after week, when I need it, the company's going to be there with either money or time or support or training, whatever it is to make my life better. She kind of bought into that. And she ended up becoming ill. She had this sort of chronic condition that had been under control for years, and it sort of resurfaced. And here's the thing. She went from working a minimum of 50 hours a week to requesting that she only work 40 hours a week, a normal work week. And management, upper management, wanted to fire her. They wanted to get rid of her because in their mind, she had just cut her work by 20 to 40%. They didn't even think for a second that everything she had been doing was above and beyond, and that they should be thrilled. They should be happy that even though she's sick, she's still willing to work 40 hours a week. She's still willing to come into the office and get it done. That wasn't good enough because she had set the expectation that she was always available. She would work plenty of hours. So when we talk about managing expectations, it goes both ways. You need to be the person that people believe you can get the job done. but people also, management, project management, sales, they also need to know that you're the kind of person that, you work your job when it really is required, you put in the extra effort, but then you go home. And the crazy thing is that me, at this time in my career, me who regularly worked 40 hours a week, but who would occasionally put in an extra 5 or 10 hours a week on occasion when needed, was seen in a better light than the woman who had always worked 50, 60 hours a week, but then got sick. And even though she was sick, she was still putting in 40 hours. She was seen in a negative light. So you have to manage expectations in both ways. Make sure that everybody understands you're the kind of person that will step up and get it done, but you're also the kind of person who respects your own free time, your own, work-life balance, and you expect them to respect it too. And when you manage that expectation, they will appreciate you when you do step up, and they won't be upset when you don't. Well, not when you don't step up, but when you stick to your normal schedule. Okay, so that's the technical aspects. Education, specialize and then diversify. Provide solutions. Don't solve problems. Don't always be the negative Nelly. Provide solutions and manage expectations, both positive and negative expectations. Oh, and then also, here's one that's I don't know where to put this one, but accept responsibility. Here's one thing that makes a huge difference in your career when problems happen, when things go wrong, when you make mistakes, and by golly, you will make mistakes. You will fuck stuff up. You're going to cost the company money. At some point, everyone does it, okay? Accept the responsibility and provide a solution. When the shit hits the fan and you walk into your boss's office and you say, listen, boss, I fucked up. This is the mistake I made. I'm aware of what happened. Here's how I fixed it. Here's how I'm going to avoid it going forward. I'm so sorry. All I can tell you is that I've taken the steps necessary to fix it, and it's not going to happen again. When you do that, you shut down that anger of the management. You shut down that resentment, and you are now part of the solution instead of being part of the problem. So that is critical. Accept responsibility when you mess up and provide a solution. And here's the other thing. If you're part of a team and the team makes a mistake, they know that the team fucked up. But when you're the one person who steps up and say, listen, we kind of screwed this up, and this is what I'm going to do to fix it. I'm taking charge of this. I'm going to make sure it gets done. You better freaking believe that they see that. And what's going to happen in the mind of the manager is now you are separate. Even though it was the whole team that made the problem, you are now removed from that problem category. You're now the solution category, and everyone else is the problem category. And all the negativity tends to just miss you, and you start to see your career advance because they look at you in a different way. They see you as the person who provides solutions. All right, let's talk about social stuff for advancing your career. Number one, be a genuine person. Be a genuine person. And what do I mean by this? Well, there's not a whole lot to it, but simply be a human being at work. One of the things that made such a huge difference between me, my coworkers, particularly among other customers, other departments, and even among me and my customers, was I always took time to be social. So we'd get into a meeting, and that first few minutes when everybody is kind of getting settled and opening up their laptop and whatever, you know what I would do? I would ask people about what was going on. You have to be aware of who you work with. You have to be aware of your customers. Pay attention to the things they say. Pay attention to the things they do. If someone's wearing a hat from some team, ask about the team. If you know that the project manager was on a trip, out of town, ask him how it went. Ask, what'd you guys do this weekend? When you are the person who's like, hey, we're all human beings. And I get, instead of just having your head down and looking through your notes, look, why are you not prepared? You're going into a meeting, be prepared before you go. It's that simple. So when you get in there, take a moment and be friendly. It creates this connection. When people see you as not just an engineer, but a person, they want to work with you. They want to make your life easy. And if they're management, they want to keep you around. And if you become kind of friends, they start to see you as a peer and not as a subordinate. So be a real person, but also keep it brief. And here's the thing. You got to know how to shut that off. What people really seem to respond well to is friendly, friendly, friendly. Okay, boom, let's get to work. And then it's all about getting to work. When the work is done, then you're friendly again. And that people it affects people. They're like, man, that guy, not only is he a nice guy, but he gets shit done. Be a genuine person. And you know what? Like, don't fake it. Just be a good person. Pay attention to the people you work with and take an interest in them. This is kind of similar, but treat everyone with respect. I can't tell you how much it has helped me in my career by treating those tier 1 people with respect, by treating the janitorial staff with respect, by making sure that the project manager got what they needed. Treat people with respect, and it almost always comes back to you in kind. So it's just one of those things, like, just be a good person. And it helps you. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you're going to be nice to a person and they're going to stab you in the back. That's life. But more often than not, you're going to help that tier 1 person. And you know what? When something goes wrong, when the shit hits the fan, they're going to want to help you out. They're going to be the one that volunteers to come in on the weekend and help you run some cable or fix something. Or I don't even know. Just treat everyone with respect. And then here's one that's really vitally important among technical people. Technical people, engineers, have egos. We all have egos. And, especially when you get to those higher levels, you tend to run into a lot of people who are a little self-absorbed. They tend to, when you're working with sort of the upper echelon of the, engineers. Oh, goodness, excuse me. When you're working with that upper echelon of engineers, these are people who have often had that, what we talked about early on, that sort of meteoric rise in the beginning of their career. They've been right about a lot of things because they're smart, because they understand how things work. They're used to being the one that's fixing stuff and solving problems. They're used to being right. They tend to have an ego. So one of the key tools that you can do as a fellow engineer is to learn to manage egos. And what does that mean? That means pat them on the back, tell them how great they are. When there is a shared success, make sure to share credit. When you do something and Bob stepped in and helped out for a minute, and then when the boss comes over and says, "Oh, hey, Jeremiah, great job." Like, well, Bob helped me out. It was a team effort. And, at first you're like, oh no, what if he gets credit for it? What if I get passed over? Like, those feelings are natural. But when that happens a second time and a third time, people aren't dumb. They start to realize that, when it's just the other guy, things aren't always as successful. But when it's Jeremiah and the other guy, they seem to be much more successful. I think it's probably Jeremiah who's actually the one, even though he's always very magnanimous. It seems to be that he's always, maybe it's actually him. So manage egos. Be aware that these guys have egos. It's okay. It's okay to stroke someone's ego from time to time because, once you do that, I used to work with this guy. He's had this massive ego, this huge chip on his shoulder, and he was so difficult to work with. I eventually became his boss, and the crazy thing was when I was actually interviewing to get hired as a junior engineer, he said not to hire me. And then 2 years later, I'm his boss. So he had this huge chip on his shoulder. And, once I realized, oh, I just need to stroke his ego. I just need to tell him how smart and he is, and tell him what a great job he did, and tell him that I'm going to give him this special project, even though it was just, it wasn't that special of a project. Stroke his ego a little bit, and then boom, suddenly he's my biggest ally. He's going out of his way to help me out. So manage people's egos. And here's the thing: this is so key to when it comes to advancing your career. Soft skills, people skills, are greater than or equal to technical skills. Of course, you have to know the technical skills, but if you got someone with pure technical ability and someone who's even maybe less technical ability but has really good soft skills, they are going to be more successful. You have to work on your soft skills. You have to learn how to work with people, understand people. And if you're like a technical person who doesn't know how to do that, what I would recommend is that you look into NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming. NLP is often sold to salespeople. It's a form of therapy, and I will tell you right now that the promises that it makes far exceed its actual capabilities. But if you go into it with a little bit of a skeptical eye, but open-minded, you can learn some amazing tools that are going to help you to understand the people around you, to interact with them, and to direct how people kind of think and interact with you in a subtle way that they're not even going to be aware of. So it's just a little bit of a social grease, if you will. Okay, let's talk about the political aspects of how to advance your career. First thing is, it is important to be aware of the game. What do I mean by that? There is not a single office without politics. When I worked at Burger King, there was office politics. When I worked at the tiny software company, there was crazy office politics. And every step along my career, there has always been office politics. Be aware that it's there. Be aware of it so you can either engage with it or avoid it. Usually it's best to be kind of just in the sphere enough that you're aware of kind of what's happening, but where it's not affecting you. But just be aware that office politics are a very real thing. You can choose to get upset about it. You can choose to get resentful about it, but that's only going to hurt you because it's never going to go away. It's always going to be a thing. Now, here's one where it gets a little tricky. Stick to your ethics. But don't judge others for theirs. Look, if you're working someplace and they are lying or stealing in a major way, then you probably should leave. But I will tell you right now, the way that our system of business is set up, in fact, there's been some studies, this is not a joke, this is 100% real, that our narcissists and sociopaths are overly represented in upper management, in like C-level management within the United States. I would argue it's probably true of other Western kind of countries that share our sort of system of business and finance. But think about that for a second. People with narcissistic and sociopathic tendencies tend to thrive in business. That means those are people who lie, they backstab, they cheat, they steal. And it's one of those things that as you start to get exposed, as your career advances and you become more and more exposed to the inner workings of upper management, it can be incredibly disgusting and disheartening. I don't want to say every, but so many of the people who I have worked for who are high up in the business, we're talking president, vice president, CEO type people, they tend to have very weak ethics. Now, what's really interesting And this is why I wrote this up here. What's fascinating about these people is they tend to also be overtly religious, very outwardly pious or outwardly moralistic. They tend to be conservative in their political leanings in such a way that, as a way of, they kind of wear it on their sleeve, as a way to express their morals, their high standing in society. And what it is, it's a form of compensation. They recognize that the things they're doing are wrong. The lying, the cheating, the backstabbing, it's wrong. And so the brain, this is just how the brain works. Like, this is one of those fascinating things. It's so worth studying the brain, the mind. But the mind can't handle that. The mind can't handle being the bad guy in the story. We're always the hero of our own story. We no matter who we are, we're the hero of our own story, unless we're seriously mentally ill. So these people, they tend to create these sort of twisted views of reality where, sure, they lie and cheat and steal in business, but they're very active in their church. They're very active in what are seen as sort of old-fashioned morals or conservative values within the community. So they want everyone to know that they're a good person. They're a really good person, and so you never suspect that they're a bad person. But here's the thing: because they're kind of like that, they tend to have a respect for people who actually have real ethics. And so if you can be the kind of person who can stick to your ethics, this is an example. I was traveling with VP of the business, just me and him. We were going out to a company, it's one of the largest companies in the world. We were heading out to meet with their board of directors. This was a huge, huge deal. A worldwide company, multi-billion-dollar company. And we were heading out to meet with their board of directors to kind of finalize some things on a project, right? Or it wasn't their board of directors. It was, I don't know who it was, a group of higher-ups. And we met the CEO, who was from France and whatever. Anyway, here's the thing. This VP that I was traveling with, he was all those things I just talked about. Very religious, very conservative, very moralistic in his standings, but I watched him lie and cheat and steal and backstab people all the time. So I just made it clear to him when we're on the plane. I just said, listen, Bob, I can't kind of support some of the things we're saying. So listen, when there's a technical question, you ask me, and I will answer the technical question. Otherwise, I'm just going to let you do all the talking. So what just happened in that exchange? I told him, hey, I'm not here to get in the way of this deal. I'm going to do what I can do to help. But there's some boundaries that I can't cross. So I'm going to leave that to you. And that's exactly what he wanted to hear. And then not only did it kind of calm his nerves that I wasn't going to say something that I shouldn't say, but it made him respect me more. And we actually got along better after that because he liked the fact on some level that I stuck to my ethics. Interestingly enough, when I left the company a year later, he totally threw me under the bus. Made it seem like I had been doing all this stuff. Unfortunately for him, I had receipts, as people say nowadays. We'll get to that. So stick to your ethics, but unless it's really, really bad, don't judge other people for theirs. Because you know what? Business is unethical. It is. If you can't kind of, I'm not saying to do those things, but if you can't let other people do it without huffing and puffing and throwing a hissy fit, your career is going to be stagnant. You're going to be stuck in lower management. That's just the reality. So, again, no judgment. You decide what you need to do. And here's the last one when it comes to the political stuff. This one's a little challenging for a lot of people, but I recommend that you become everyone's confidant. How do you do that? Well, it goes back to the social stuff. You treat everyone with respect. You be a genuine human being. When I would, it's just like I talked about with the meeting, when I would go sit down with my boss or my boss's boss, I would plop down in the chair and be like, "Oh, hey, man. So what's, and I'd have a little conversation. What you do this weekend, whatever." I kind of had, early in my career, I had a job where I worked with almost exclusively doctors. And it's one of those things like growing up, we're always taught that like, oh, doctors, they're special, they're different, they're better than everyone else, they're smarter than everyone else. Like, oh, doctor. And as I worked with these doctors, I realized, oh no, they're not smarter than everyone else. Sometimes I would be like, so you completed med school, really? Wow, good for you. They were smart and they were hardworking, but they were 100% regular people. And of course they are. Like, that. We know that on a cognitive level. But it really flipped a switch in my brain, and it allowed me to kind of turn off that sense of awe, so that when I'm sitting with my manager, I saw my manager as they're no better than I am. They're in a position of authority, but that doesn't make them better than I am. They're still a human being. And so I always found time to connect as a human being with everyone. The tier 1 guy, the janitor, the vice president, the CEO, in little ways. And over time, that breaks down those barriers, and they start to see you not as, oh, he's the engineer, or he's my lowly employee. They just see you as, he's just a guy I work with. And when you become that confidant, they're going to start telling you things. Why? Because, unless they're one of those sociopaths, they don't like a lot of the stuff they got to do. They don't like necessarily playing the game. So they're going to want to vent. And if you can be that person that they vent to, you're going to know. I can't tell you the company secrets that were told to me that always helped me to just make sure to keep me and my team in a safe position, made sure to, it kept me aware of who not to engage with too much or who to engage with. This is the game you have to play. So slowly, because if you just walk into your boss's office and like, "What's up, dude?" Excuse me. That's probably not going to go over really well. But if you slowly over time, you set the relationship. Your actions, your relaxed demeanor, your genuineness is going to set the relationship from one of a power dynamic to one of equals who just, one just happens to be able to tell you what to do around certain things. But, they're not better than you. Once you've kind of established that, they're going to want to keep you around. They're going to want to confide in you. And when it comes time for a promotion, they're going to want it to be you because they already like you. They already trust you. They've already told you things, and it hasn't come back to hurt them because you didn't rat them out or you didn't throw them under the bus. Excuse me. That's just water, by the way. It's not coffee. Okay, so that's one of the more complex ones. We could probably spend a lot of time about the certain techniques to go into that, but obviously this is already very long. So let's just wrap it up with my number one top tip. My number one top tip to help you advance your career. Here it is. CYA. Always cover your ass. What do I mean by that? I mean, you document everything. You keep your emails. You organize your emails. When someone comes over to you and says, "Oh, hey, Jeremiah, can you do this thing for me?" Be like, "Oh, hey, I'm really busy. Could you shoot me an email? Leave me a voicemail, and I will totally take care of that for you. I just need you to to send me an email of it. I cannot tell you how many times that taking notes in a meeting, keeping track of emails, keeping copies of voicemails has saved my butt. Because what did we talk about? We talked about the game. We talked about those ethics. Once you start playing at the higher levels, people will become intimidated by you. They're going to see that, hey, Jeremiah seems to have a special relationship with the VP. I'm not sure why that is. Is he trying to get my job? What's going on? So, you kind of start opening yourself up to being more in these political machinations. It's all ludicrous. It's all bullshit. Even if you're not necessarily, you're like, hey, I'm just trying to keep my job. I'm just trying to make a few extra bucks. So cover your ass, record everything, get everything in writing, So I told you about that guy who threw me under the bus. Well, they had been asking me to do something that it wasn't even, it was perfectly legal, but I felt really uncomfortable with it. It was just wrong. It's not, it wasn't right. They were asking me to use, it's just too complicated to get into, but I wasn't happy with it. It was stressing me out. It's the reason I left the company. And what I did, though, I kept track of everything, all the emails and voicemails where I was told to do this thing, even though I had the emails where I said, listen, I don't think this is a good idea. I had all of that. So when he threw me under the bus, I just sent an email off from a anonymous account with all the receipts, and somebody got fired. I had already quit, so it didn't help me at all. But there you go. Okay, man, this is really long. I hope you found it really informative. It's real stuff. This is my experience working at really all different levels of IT and just life, job, career in general. So I hope you enjoyed it. Please, leave me a comment down below. Let me know what you think. All right, this is Jeremiah. See you next time.